Hey guys, this is Lucid. We're going to be doing another Dominions intervention, this time for late age Lemuria. And it's obviously a nation that I have played before. And yeah, for those of you who don't know, I've got a full Let's Play on it, so feel free to watch it. This is for a player called What's, and yeah, we'll take a look at his position. It's on this very funky map that has a bunch of food on it. It's kind of hard to like see what's going on, but anyway, we'll talk about it. So for those of you who don't know, the nation is a nation of ghosts, and their best mages are immortal, so it's kind of like immortal ghosts. They are pop kill, so all the population dies. They get free spawn in terms of ghosts. And they're mages. We'll go ahead and look at them real quick. Where's Lemuria? Here we go. So their mages are all Death 3, or like their best mages, are Death 3, Astral 2, and then they get a random of Astral or Death, or Air or Water. And that's basically your magic access for the faction. You have some crappier mages who are just Death 1. These guys he uses researchers, and if they're in Magic Dominion, they actually research pretty damn well. You get free spawn if you have a temple out in the middle of nowhere, like here. You get a bunch of crappy little shadow free spawn or like dispossessed spirits. These guys. If you have a good fort, oh shit, he's got a lot of ghosts in here. If you have a fort, instead of getting just armorless crap, so the problem with these free spawn, why they're kind of crappy, is they don't do damage. They have a paralyze attack, which doesn't do damage. And I say that it can do damage, like I forget the mechanic, but there's some mechanic where people are paralyzed and they get hit again with another paralyze, like it can cause them damage. But they're not really damage dealers. Let's put that out there, right? So they're okay, but they're not great. These guys, on the other hand, are what you get if you have a fort and a temple, or maybe even just a fort, but generally you're going to want to have temples in all your forts. And the spawn rate for any of these is going to be dependent on your dominion in a particular province, so it's nice to have high dominion. But they're ethereal. They have a shield, but they have no armor, so you can see protection is 0. They have spectral spears, which basically the way this works is they're magic weapons, so that's nice. But if your opponent, if they make an MR check, so if they pass the MR check, they're only going to take half damage, which means this is going to be like a 7 damage attack. Which, if they have any protection, it's going to do no damage. So if there's 0 protection, it's going to be a lot better. Because then even on the half MR, like when you fail an MR check, they're going to, yeah, and it's going to do a lot of damage to them. But for like decent troops, if they have good MR and they're going to be passing most of their MR checks, you're not going to do any damage to them still. So these guys are not very killy. Now that said, a lot of PD and a lot of like indies when you're expanding, they get murdered by these guys because they're ethereal. They have javelins they can throw. They have a shield, so they can occasionally block stuff. Yeah, these guys do very well against like mediocre, crappy stuff without major pre-support, like very well. Problem is, you take mediocre crap and you throw mages and priests behind it, and all of a sudden these guys are getting murdered. And you have like elite troops, guys with protection and magic resistance, and these guys suck again too, even without much mage support. Especially if they have magic. Any troop with magic weapons too just murders these guys. So that's the nation, in terms of the units you get. Now, the way this nation kind of plays, I have so much to say. So the way they kind of play is the number of forts you have is extremely important. So you definitely want to fort up. Yeah. Okay, so the forts are important. Your units are not mindless, so they have morale, which means they can run in combat, but it also means they can hold up fort walls well, because mindless units can't hold up fort walls, but your guys can. So what that means is you can sit inside your fort with your free spawn and it's almost impossible to break through a Lemurian fort held up in such a way. And that's pretty important. Okay, what else? Oh, right. Because your troops are ethereal and like they have this trait I was mentioning earlier where they're really good against PD and they're really good against Indies, but they're kind of crappy against mage and priests. Um, One way to think about it is you should always be raiding if you think you're going to be bumping into PD. But you have to be very, very cautious about running into a player army, because player armies are going to have mages and priests and elite troops. So you'll potentially get crushed. So Lemuria is this kind of weird faction that loves raiding. Loves raiding. They love sitting inside their forts, right? And they also love, especially once you have some research targets, having really big fights. But they're very, very cautious about when they pick to have those fights. And I think that's like the most important mindset to be in when you're playing Lemuria, is you have to know when is the right time to pick fights, when is the right time to sit in forts, and then you need to be prepared to emit just an enormous amount of raiding pressure. So I think that's kind of the overview for a lot of the nation. The other thing is they can go underwater. All their stuff can go underwater. And one thing you can't really tell, because this is like a funky food map, the fruits and vegetables and meats are all land. The sauces or soups are oceans, and you can't really tell. Like, I was looking at it at the beginning, and I couldn't really tell. Like, okay, this is a sauce, this is a sauce. So the player What's sent me this turn file, and he said, okay, I've been in this game, I'm playing Lemuria, it's going pretty well. I've got a ton of provinces, which he does. He's in, like, the #1 spot, but everybody else has decided that the Lemurian cancer cannot continue. It must be stopped. And because of that, they have all declared war against him. So he's at war with every neighbor, and he's on a map where he's in the very middle. So the nice thing is he's protected by 2 sauce dishes, or oceans. So it's kind of difficult for everybody to get at him. Like, not everybody has great access. But who he's fighting Micklin down here. He's fighting Ulm over here. Agartha, I'm not sure is actually fighting him, but potentially. He's probably going to get kicked off this, but that's probably fine. I give up on that. You don't have to worry about Agartha. He's fighting Phalegra up here, who has Laestrygonian tyrants running around. And then Raga, who he had a nap with, has ended his nap, and potentially will attack him in the near future, but hasn't done so yet. And I don't see any Ragan armies. Potentially... Oh, here's one. I think... Wait, so what is Raga doing? Raga's finishing Pythium. That's what's happening. So Raga's probably going to come attack him. Do we see any of the Zayadins? I don't know if they have a magic... Do we not see anything here? Okay, I don't know if they have magic weapons. Sorry. A little tired of yelling. But anyway, so Raga's actually kind of big. So I have to deal with them. And then they have Patala over here who's attacking them. They have Relay, Late Age Relay, so this isn't nearly as scary as Middle Aged Relay, that they're at war with, but they've gone AI. Which actually is really good for you, for this Lemuria player. But that's kind of the question, or like the situation he's in. I'm getting now attacked by everybody, and so how am I gonna, like, potentially win the game? And obviously, if you're doing a Dominion's Intervention video, it's going to present quite a big challenge, because it's not like, okay, well, let's try to convince everybody to make peace. I don't think there's much room for Diplo in this game. You're clearly in the #1 position. Everybody's pretty much right to attack you. They have managed... I don't know if you can throw off... I think everybody agrees they have to kill you. And I think it's going to be pretty hard to break that up. And so what's going to be... I think what we're going to do in this video is we're going to talk about, like, what's a good medium run strategy? Like, what's a goal for the next 15 turns? Like, what do we want the game board to look like in 15 turns? And then we're going to come up with what we need to do that. And then we're going to have to figure out, like, ultimately we're going to have to fight all these players. So we're going to have to talk about, like, what are the things we need to do to fight these players better? We're going to look at your research. We're going to look... You obviously have a huge gym surplus, so we're going to look at how to spend that. And we're going to look at army composition and things like that. So I think we've kind of set the stage, if you will. Before we get into all these like more detailed questions, we're going to take a look at a few battles. The first battle we're going to look at here is with Patala. So we've got a decent Lemurian force here versus a rather large Patalan force. A lot of archers, you can see. He's got a Flame Spirit back here who's going to be doing flaming arrows, which is cool. So now they all have flaming arrows. And Lemuria's running forward. Somebody here is going to cast Rain of Stones. I think it's... yeah, this guy. Which is kind of funny because he has 0 protection, so he's probably going to kill himself with Rain of Stones. A lot of times you want to do like Iron Skin before you cast it. And there's just like a little bit of some front line up here like that's getting basically beaten up. The main problem with Lemuria is if you get all your stuff grouped up, like bunched up, and then you get hit with like swaths of arrows and banishment and there's just a bunch of stuff. Fire cloud coming down. Yeah, you're just gonna like there's another fight. You're gonna get murdered. This is like how to get murdered as Lemuria. This is not what you want, right? Your little ghosts are scared, so they're running away. So, you know, if this were all you had to deal with, I'm sure you would feel confident and there'd be not much to talk about. But this is just one player, right? And there's one army. This is a scout. So, that's one battle that's important. I've kind of gone and looked through them all. And then, here's another battle. This is not really a battle. This is just one of the armies you're going to have to fight. So it's 15 vampire counts here in the front, and a bunch of these guys. I don't think he had any of the required tools to do flaming arrows, but imagine this with flaming arrows, because a good Olm should be doing flaming arrows. This is scary. Like, what are you going to do against this? Ton of skelly spam. Now, your ghosts are good against skelly spam because skeletons don't have magic weapons. They don't have great protection, and they have low MR. So you're going to be able to kill them, and they're not going to be able to kill you too easily. But killing a wave of skeletons, like, you're not going to do it super fast, and there's a bunch of archers that are potentially going to be nailing you. And then, you know, if they're smart, they can put them in a communion and have a few at the front casting Wither Bones. It can get ugly. If it's just like it is, though, this is almost all the damage coming at you right now is physical, though, which you can kind of deal with. But, yeah. Like, this would be tricky, but as it is right now, it's not that scary. So this is another kind of one of the big armies. The other thing you've got to deal with is these Micklin dudes. So he's got a big army here. On top of this fort, which was, it looks like, what, Utgards? And then coming down here, here's a big group that's coming to attack you. So he's got Aussies, a ton of priests. So these priests are going to banish the crap out of you. And the Aussies are pretty scary. Their bless is quickness, and then some strength, and then blood surge and fortitude. So they're very killy. They're hard to kill quickly with fortitude. Because they don't have great protection. They have a fair amount of HP, but then this is, like, to normal damage, it's basically giving them, like, 60 HP. That's what these resistances are doing. So, it's kind of a son of a bitch. Okay, so that is Micklin. Now, Micklin has this bunch of Jaguar Warriors. Jaguar Warriors actually have a pretty big weakness, and they have really low MR. And they're also not... Importantly, you'll notice these guys did not have magic weapons as part of their bless. So, kind of overall assessment of risk level of these guys is... it's a strong army, like with strong sacreds, but it's not something you can't fight. It's something you need to fight when you're very well prepared for it. And I think we'll talk about what all the tools you have in your toolbox, but you already have a lot of the tools you need. But you need to be very careful about doing it, and you want to fight them when you have overwhelming force. Okay. Relay has gone AI. So I think you're just going to march stuff in and kill them. We'll talk about that a little bit later. The tyrants here. So Phalegra seems to be mostly attacking through the ocean with tyrants. And like this guy has 25 MR, he's about to cast Iron Will. So boom, he's now up to 29. Got a ton of reinvigoration. 7. Right, because it's part of his bless too. He's got regen and reinvigoration as part of his bless. Yeah. He is going to be scary to kill. Oh my god. And then plus attack means he's going to be extra murdery. Yeah, good luck killing this guy. The thing is, his buff side, he's not doing Phoenix Pyre yet. So you can kill him. His protection gets super high. He's doing a lot of things like Legions of Steel and other stuff. The thing is, when you get your protection this high, you actually don't take damage. You're not going to take any damage from ghosts. Which means you never go berserk. Which means you can trigger them to rout with morale. So if he's attacking into your dominion, this is going to be a good bit lower. It's going to be -2, so it'll be 17. And if you're spamming stuff like Fear or Frighten or any of that stuff, you can get him to rout. But how to deal with... Okay, I have, like... I fought... That's the other thing. I've played a lot of these nations against Lemuria. Like, I played Ulm against Lemuria. I've played Phalegra against Lemuria. I mean, not a lot. But those are the ones I've played against Lemuria. Have I played Relay against them? No. Micklin against them? No. But, and I've played Lemuria themselves a few times. So, but anyway, when I played Phalegra, like, these guys are just going to run through you like a hot knife through butter, unless you're really well prepared for them. And if you wanted me to tell you some like way to just kind of cheat and kill them, there is none. There are ways to kill them, and we'll talk about it, but they're very kill-y, right? So how are you going to kill them? It's actually kind of tricky. One thing that we'll kind of look at here at the end, which is kind of hilarious, is that... So this guy, your PD, your 1 PD, is actually going to do... Usually okay. They can actually scare them off with Frighten. I've had Tyrants run just from the PD hitting him with Frighten, so that's kind of funny. So this is what you're going to have to deal with Phalegra. Eventually, you're probably going to have to... You might have to deal with even some Phalegran armies. So anyway, that's kind of... That's the broad diplomatic overlay. First thing I want to talk through is what is a good state for the game to be in right now. Everybody's fighting you. What would be good? What would it be good for the game to look like in like 15 turns? One thing we want is we still want to have this lake. Like we don't. This lake is a fair bit of your income. Well, maybe not. Actually, most of it's dead. You must have had this for a long time. This is the other thing, man. Templing up the lake, like, cool and all, because you need temples to get death income. You've got very high dominion strength, but I don't know. I think it's a waste of money. I mean, it would be my last... I would probably eventually do it, especially when, like, once all the population's already dead. But, like, this is... The way I look at lakes is they're a big piggy bank for you. Especially in the beginning of the game as Lemuria. You can't build forts there, but you can collect income from it, and you're very good underwater. Because a lot of the evocations and stuff, which normally murder Lemuria above water, don't work underwater. So I'm generally not a fan of templing up lakes. The other problem with templing them up is then when a big tyrant or somebody comes through and they start raiding, like, what are you going to do to stop him? Like, he's probably going to... If I were him, I would move here, because I would kill a temple. And it's going to be very hard to stop. We'll talk through how to do that, but it's tricky. But anyway, back to what do we want it to look like in 50 turns. We want to hold on to as much of the lake as we can. So we'll talk about how to do that. Ideally, I think, want to have this forted up. Now, I just said a minute ago you can't fort up the lake. How are we going to do that? We'll talk about research in a minute, but right now you have 1,000 research a turn almost. You're at Conjuration 4. You need to run up to Conjuration 7. I think this is target number 1. And I'm saying this after I've already spent a fair amount of time looking at the turn and all your research and stuff. So I know it looks like I'm just jumping to this, but that's kind of first point. Living Castle, you have a huge nature bank, right? You just cast Mother Oak, so you're going to be getting a ton of nature coming in. You need to have living castles researched like yesterday. Now, how long until you get it? It's like 5 turns, right? You're doing 1,000 a turn. Next turn you can do 5. Turn after that you'll be able to get to 6. Turn after that, or it's going to take 2 turns after that to get to 7. Maybe 3. So you're like 4 to 5 turns away from 7, depending on how fast you research. Now, how are you going to cast it? You don't have nature. Well, you have it. Let's talk about your pretender real quick. Your pretender is somewhere down here. Here she is. So let's take a look at your scales real quick, because we kind of do need to talk about generally just like what your build is, so everybody knows. You've tanked all your scales as one should. It doesn't look like you totally tanked death. Or maybe that's just from having the Throne of Growth. Anyway. Did you totally tank death? Growth +1? You should have death 2 in most of your provinces. I either see like neutral. Yeah, you might not have fully tanked. So anyway, but you have luck and you have magic, which is nice. For your bless, you've got, just as another orientation for people, you've got precision 3, this from a throne, magic resistance 1, arcane finesse, this from your pretender, undead regeneration, which is really nice, and recuperation, which is really nice. Now the other thing is, as you're running up to conjuration 7, very hard to stop at 7 when at 8 just lies Well of Misery. So yeah, probably going to go ahead up to 8. That would probably be my research target. Forget whatever you're doing. Boom. Okay. Now the other thing is, when people have teamed up on you, it's probably worth saving up a death bank to go ahead and get Well of Misery off. How much would you do for your first casting? I think it's totally up to you. And actually, maybe you don't do it. The thing is, when everybody's already at war with you, you have no idea how much they can pull to dispel. Like, it wouldn't be unreasonable for them to do 300 pearls. But honestly, you could do... How long would it take you to get 400 death? Take you 11 turns? So maybe you come back. It's worth thinking about. I don't know. I'm actually kind of agnostic, because you probably need to save up like 400. Either you just cast it for like flat cost for 80, which you could do in like with like 2 turns of income and hope it takes people a while to dispel it, so you get your income back. That's a gamble, obviously. Or you save up till you have like 400 and cast it if you want it to stay up. Or you put it up for 80 and then they cast it, they take it down. Well, I don't know. There's no right answers to this, my friend. People are definitely going to dispel it. It's just a question of whether you get more than 80 gems if you cast it immediately. But it could be... Yeah, I don't know. Anyway. That, I think, is the first objective. Getting this all forted up with Living Castle. So Living Castle, I mentioned, you need nature. You have it on your god. Because you have the recuperation part of your bless. And so your god is... nature 5. Right? So you have a huge nature bank. You do not have water. So to cast it, you have to empower your god in water. You should do this like ASAP, right? Go ahead and empower your god in water. That's also your only nature water crosspath, and you can start forging Claim of Pearls with that too when you're not busy doing something else. But to cast Living Castle, you need to be... Basically, you're going to empower your god in water, and then you got to get them into the water, right? And once they're in the water, they can target any water province. So, you could throw Boots of Quickness on her, have her run up here, and then from here, she can start fording up the lake. You want to get the lake forded up in a hurry, right? It's going to protect all your investment in the temples, or not all, but some. Yeah. So I think that's kind of like... If you hold on to all your land, you eat Relay, which I think is kind of a given at this point with them going AI. Relay is not a nation which is terribly good with AI. They rely on communions and they rely on assassins, and the AI is not terribly good with either of those. So you should just eat them alive. And they're basically kind of crushed anyway. So eat as much of Relay as you can. I think everything else, if you just hold, you're good. Right? So if you fort up the salsa and the soup with this, as much as you can, and with the kind of nature income you have, like you'll be looking pretty good forting all this up. You'll basically be able to do every single turn. You'll be able to do a new fort, and that's a big deal. The thing you have to be careful about when you do it is do not do it in a province that a tyrant can attack, unless you're immediately ready to kick them off. Because the way it will work, like if they move into a fort that you just built in Magic Phase, they'll take the province, but the fort will start with 0 fortification, so it will be instantly cracked, and then they can just send that tyrant in. And now they have a fort, and it's hard for you to take back. And I guess while we're talking about this, I said a lot of this is you want to keep a large portion of the lake. 1 PD here actually is really good for you, because more than that, and your guys can they can basically, the PD can run and then your mage in the back will run. But yeah, you actually have a chance of routing a tyrant with Frighten, like a significant chance, not like high, but significant with 1 PD. The other thing you want to do is you want to raid behind wherever the tyrants are going. So what I would do is I would have a bunch of these little groups, and like maybe imagine you have like 6 or maybe even up to 10, but like let's say 6 running around in the lake. And normally they're scripted to retreat. Right? And everybody's scripted to retreat like this. And you're just moving them around to get them into position. And if they're in a province that could, like, if I'm moving up here, because, like, next turn I might raid or something, I don't want these guys to fight. If a tyrant comes and attacks, I want them retreating to get out. But if now they're going to go on the offensive, like, and I think there's a chance this guy's going to move here, then, yeah, let's take this guy like this, and let's have him run right up here and attack, right? And then if he moves anywhere but here, then we'll raid. Now, if we bump into him, then he's obviously going to kill all these guys. Okay, that's the game we're playing. The thing, though, is as the population dies, he can't even do PD dumps. So, like, a lot of these provinces, which are 0 population, he can't have any PD. So, when it's one of these provinces with 0 PD, you can just have your guys set to retreat. And unless he has a tyrant in it, then you'll just get the province for free, which is kind of cool. So, until we have a way to deal with the tyrants, you just want to let them run through, but make sure you have enough small raiding parties to clean up behind them. That's the idea. And then occasionally what can happen, and this will happen, even if it only happens twice this whole game, it's worth it, right? If you're doing a really good job cleaning up behind him, then, what can happen is he goes to raid, you get that like 1 in 10 chance or 1 in 5 chance, whatever the odds are, that you frighten him off with your little PD casting Frighten. Well, if that does happen, then yeah, your guys come behind, they cut off his only retreat route, and now that tyrant's dead. So it's possible you do it twice in a game, but that's actually pretty nice if you can swing it. And the more pressure you put on taking this stuff, the less likely it is he's going to get back to all your temples you have here, which you don't really want him getting to. One thing I was wondering with Relay is, do they actually get... Oh yeah, you can get more death gems than just 10 now, because Dominion Strength goes up. I don't know if this is a bug or if this is a feature. Okay, so what does good look like for like 10 turns from now? You've been raiding behind the tyrants as they take your shit, because they're going to take your shit. You've got your god in here, and you are forting up. And as you fort up, ideally you're going to protect temples and labs first, right? But if you can't, then you're just going to put forts every single turn, and temple it once you have it forted. But right now, I don't. Yeah, I really don't like having unforted temples anywhere, but especially in the ocean. The ocean's a big piggy bank. Um, so if you do that and you hold on to all your forts that you currently have, you'll be in very good shape. So I think that's like minimum of what to hope for. Now you can also fort up the Relayan Lake. I mean, they obviously have some forts in here, but once you're done forting up over here, you can send your god over here and have them fort. That's like the main job for your god, I think. Now, obviously, after that, that's a good goal, and if you do that for the next 15 turns, you'll be solid. For that to work, you're going to actually have to kill some of these other player armies. So I think we're going to get now into the rather interesting part of the game about how do we deal with all these different players. And what should kind of the overall thought process be, and then what should army composition look like and stuff like that. So the overall thought process, right, is you need to be extremely selective about when you fight. Your ghosts are resources, and you want to spend your resources efficiently. You don't have enough ghosts to waste. And what I mean by that is, like, your free spawn rates are not high enough so that if you throw away tons of ghosts, you'll be okay. You need your ghosts for a lot of the things. The same way, like a Blood Nation, like there's a lot of Blood Nations in your game, by the way. The same reason they need all their mages for different things, like to research and forge items and blood hunt and make sanguine dowsing rods, like they need and to fight in combat, like they need their mages for a ton of different things. You need your ghosts for a lot of different things. You need your ghosts to raid, you need your ghosts for armies, and you need your ghosts to hold up fort walls. And holding up fort walls in some cases is the most important. And so these guys, the shadows, like these are the guys that you get as free spawn from like non-fort provinces or from your priests. They have really, really, really bad siege defense. I don't know if this is actually what it is. So if you have 100 of them, you get 10. Or I don't know if this is a rounding in the display, because it should be 0.03 is the calculation, but it may have rounded it up to 0.1. I don't know. But either way, they are horrible at holding up fort walls. These guys, however, are very solid at holding up fort walls. They give 0.5. So like 100 of these guys provide 50 siege defense. Now, if you have a 500 wall integrity fort, and you have 200 ghosts inside it, they're going to be providing 100 siege defense. Right? So if the player's coming in with like this, which is like... yeah. I mean, this is like 200 siege strength. So they're going to have 100 over your siege defense. It's going to take them 5 turns to work their way through a fort. That's a long time for them to sit there and be vulnerable to attack. So every ghost that you lose is a ghost that's not potentially holding up fort walls. And where you want them is you want all your... like, this fort doesn't have any ghosts. So you want to have ghosts inside most of your defendable borderline forts. If you're going to lose a battle, like if you have a bunch of ghosts trapped inside a fort and eventually they crack the fort and break out, you usually want to get your ghosts out, so you're going to retreat. Like, have everybody attack out of the fort and retreat. Usually you want a smackling of troops in your inner forts, but usually you want most of them out on the border. Now, the nice thing for you is you don't have a very big land border. You have, like, this, which awkwardly doesn't have a fort here. Like, you really want a fort here, but it's going to be pretty contentious to get one up. And I'm sure they're not going to, try to let you. I don't know if you actually... yeah, you haven't started fort construction right yet. So, yeah, a huge part of playing Lemuria is when knowing kind of to do what. And there's a huge value to sitting in your forts. Now, the raiding. I want to talk a little bit about raiding. So here was one of your raids. I don't think we watched this. I'm actually re-recording this because I kind of rambled on a bit too much in the first recording. Sometimes I think I just need to record it once to get all my thoughts fleshed out, and I kind of went and re-recorded it. So yeah, talk about wasting an hour. So these are a bunch of dispossessed spirits, which actually are okay against very small PD, but this is just like 10 or 15 PD, which is going to be enough to repel them. Problem is, they do a good job paralyzing. You can see these guys turning gray, but they don't do any damage. So eventually these guys are going to die. So usually you want to mix them in, like they're very good chaff, but you want to mix them in with some guys who actually do damage, like these. But yeah, these are good ratings. So what does a good rating squad look like? Let's go ahead and look at it. Combat speed 12, combat speed 9. So these guys are going to catch up a little bit. Okay, so let's turn this guy into a raider. One thing you can do is mix in one guy with fear. Now there's a chance he'll die, but you know, such is life for an undead. Put these guys up here. I think everybody here has javelins. Yeah. So let's have them raid. You want just a few now these guys are valuable. So having a nice amount of this kind of like chaffy chaff is nice. Now what you can do, you put your preacher in the same tile as these guys that are going to be on the fire. Now we're not expecting to be fighting priest. If we're fighting priest, this army's probably going to die. So you can do protection. What I kind of prefer to do is to do power. Like this and just spam this out. And that's going to be nice. So you just do that. These guys are going to fire. These guys are going to swarm around. After these guys launch 2 javelins, then they're going to run in behind these. Works pretty well. But the other nice thing about this is this guy's going to have a nice little fear aura. So these guys are going to run in. And then hopefully this guy doesn't die. He's got enough chaff around him where I guess the odds are kind of low. And then, yeah, these guys will kind of come in and hopefully actually do some of the killing. So, there's a ton of ways to do it. The important thing really is just have like a ratio where you have a fair amount of chaff, a small amount of, units that are going to do some damage. And like this is a pretty efficient PD rating squad. They'll murder these wolves and stuff like that. You have to be a little careful if you're raiding in blood hunting provinces like right here, where there's mage support. So like here was another Lemurian raid. So this you can see it's not as much chaff. It's more of like your real troops, but there's a lot of wolves here. But this actually is the kind of stuff that your ghosts are going to do well against. The problem is there's just too much of it, right? So your guys are going to get surrounded, and then, yeah. Now I don't know if you knew there would be this many, or if they just kind of like moved more people in. So you're not dying very quickly, and you're actually killing a lot of the wolves. There's just too much stuff. And yeah, look, the wolves are routing you. And now it's just the skelly spam, and then your guys route. So, honestly, like if you look at that, it's not too bad. You killed a ton of wolves. The wolves are free spawn for him. The thralls are free spawn, so it's kind of just free spawn died on both sides. This was probably a blood hunting operation. So, picking out the right size army to kind of come deal with these, that's always kind of a trick. But, yeah. The other thing I want to talk about on raiding, before we move off raiding, because once we leave raiding, we're going to go into army composition, is there's actually a trick you can do. So these guys are stealthy, and most of your shadows actually are stealthy too. So like these guys are all stealthy. Which obviously is nice, because now you can have stealthy raiders move around, which is really nice to get into the back line, and they're really annoying to get rid of. Problem is, you don't really want to waste mage turns, because you really need research. And you certainly can do this, but I wouldn't really recommend it. There's a poor man's trick to doing this, and it's using scouts. And the trick is, you make... ideally with a hammer, but you make a Rod of the Leper King, which would cost you 3 gems, and you now have basically a 3-gem scout. Now your scout's eventually going to die, but that's okay. Because you just get another scout before he dies to be in the same province, and you basically hand off the Rod of the Leper King and you hand off to the troops, and you get a new scout. And funnily, depending who you're fighting, it can be more funny. If you die, you can give the Rod of the Leper King to them, and then they get diseased, which is always kind of funny. But especially like this map, I feel is not very big, and it's kind of like just with the positioning, it's a little bit choke pointy. So being able to pull his resources all over the place can be nice. So just, like for each of your neighbors have, especially for people doing blood. The thing is, so raiding blood hunters with like stealthy raiders, because like imagine Miklin's got like all this stuff back here being blood hunted. And the same for Ulm. The problem when you raid it is they tend to have patrol chaff in addition to PD, and then they also are going to have like a couple blood hunters. So it's harder to raid. But you really, like, getting to it is more valuable because you're like killing all of their patrol chaff, which can take them a while to accumulate, etc., etc. So in this particular instance, like what could you do? The Rod of the Leper King, it's going to give you 50 undead command. And then these guys, how much do they cost to get? I forget what they're called. An Acolyte? They're 11. That's kind of expensive. But you do have D1, so you can do some skelly spamming and stuff. See, it might be good actually to take one of these guys to give them a Rod of the Leper King, and then they can have 100, because to raid the kind of stuff you're going to want to hit, because the thing is when you're moving scouts around, like you don't really know what's in neighboring provinces if you're deep in enemy territory. You'll just like, no, there's not a fort here, right? And so you move, and if you're stealthy, if you go into a blood hunting province, they're going to patrol you out, and then you'll have a battle. So, if you move and there's no battle, like, because maybe there's not many people there or whatever, you can choose to attack, or you can like move and attack somewhere else the next turn. But you're going to need, for raiding these guys, you're going to need a lot more guys. And I think that will mean committing an Acolyte, which is kind of expensive. You got to be careful doing it. So maybe you do like, like one Rod of the Leper King Scout, which will just follow behind like your main raiding. I don't know. I think the base thing for you actually would be like a Rod of the Leper King on a Lemurian Acolyte that can run around. I don't know if you have any... This is your level 2 mage, which people don't really ever get. But 100 undead leadership, they're not immortal though. Yeah. And these guys are kind of overkill. The nice thing about, like, if you were to use these guys for raiding is that, A, they're immortal, so if they die, you don't care. And they're astral, so they can't be mind hunted out. The problem is they're really heavy investment, like 50 death gems. But it's not a horrible idea, actually, because they can skelly spam, too. It might be worth it. Just take, like, one of these guys. Oof, it's expensive, though. So I'm not sure. I'll just put it out as an option for you to consider. Is you take, like, these guys can obviously lead a ton of undead. You take, like, 145 shadows, and you've got a fair amount of preachers that are calling shadows. You take, like, 145 of these guys. You mix in, I think these guys are stealthy, too. Yeah, and they do damage. So you mix in some of these shade beasts. And then, I forget which of these guys are... Yeah, these guys are stealthy, too, so you mix in some of them for the fear aura. And you just have them run around and murder... I think it's worth it. Specifically because you're fighting blood. And it's going to be pretty hard for him to catch you. Because you just are going to be sneaking around, and you can either, like attack, sneak, or you can do attack, sneak, sneak, attack. Like it's going to be really hard for him to predict where you're going to be. And he's going to have to catch you with patrollers. So, but you normally, like, and it's something you can do with Lemuria, is you just do the scout with the leper rod. But I think because, like, these blood hunting guys are going to be having so much, you really, you need to think about doubling down, either with this guy with the leper rod, or, and I think in this case, just based on the amount of kind of what you're going to be running into, could be better just to go ahead and bite the bullet and send one Grand Lemur. But one army of 150 or however many shadows is going to just do a real number on their blood economy. And I mean, ultimately, you're going to be like you getting after the blood economy is so important when you're fighting Lemuria. I mean, Ulm. And they can catch you, but then if they catch you, your guy just respawns. Okay, so I think that's a rating. Now, yeah, as a Lemuria, you want to be rating basically as much as you can. This is what I'll say is this is like an awkward sized army. You have them all kind of together. Okay, we haven't really talked about it too. I've actually kind of edited this from my last recording. But so when I was looking around, almost all your guys are in hold and attack like this. Problem with this formation, few problems. One is they're in box. You want to do skirmish because they're going to be getting hit by arrows and stuff like that. You want to spread them out. Second is their hold and attack. You want to do hold and attack rear in general. Third problem with this, and I fixed this down there, is that these guys have javelins, which are really nice. Now, a lot of times you want to do hold and attack rear, but if you have somebody like in the second row, and they're just going to kind of slam forward anyway, a lot of times you just want to take your javelin troops and put them on fire. If you mix them in with the other, like shades or spectral infantry, shadow soldiers, whatever, they're not going to use their javelins. You need to have the crew only have javelins for them to shoot. So split them up for the second row, put them like behind, they'll do javelins. That'll give you like more attack density up front without getting your troops all clustered together. Okay? So, but don't think that just because they have javelins you need to script them to fire. Hold and attack rear is still super duper good. But what I was going to say was, like, this group is kind of like a raiding group, and if you knew what you were slamming into, like it's a bunch of, it's like a big blood hunting operation, then yeah, it's, it can make sense to bring a lot, if you know there's not going to be an army here. But you need to be really careful about, like, moving this many guys around without, mage support, if you think you might ever run into an army. Like, do not, like, keep this thing completely clear of player armies. It's totally okay to use this as raiding, but you need to have like enough intel to know that you're not going to run into a player army. Very important. Because like this is heavy raiding. This is raiding to deal with like PD dumps or blood hunting patrollers. That's what this group is. And then yeah, you can totally feel free to just like split this group up and go in different places, and all will be good. And then reconsolidate them. But like this is a pretty good way to do raiding. This is fine, but just the problem here is we don't know what's in any of these provinces nearby, potentially. So you don't know what's going to like move and patrol like into this fort or move into this province. Like this one's actually probably reasonably safe to raid into. Here, like he could move the army here. It's kind of all guesswork. But like down here we have Itimu with an army. He's actually okay because we're just fighting Relay, but like, you had a lot of undead in this army. And you did have some mage support, but not great mage support. Like this guy, you had one Rain of Stonecasters, which he ended up killing himself with Rain of Stones. But not all the buffs. So I think the next thing we're going to go into is like army, like true army composition. We've talked about raiding. Stealthy Raiders are really good. Now, Stealthy Raiders, Raga is also a Blood Nation. Not kind of the same degree of Blood Nation that Ulm and Micklin are. And Falegra's not a Blood Nation, but they have some kind of... Well, no, they don't really get free spawn. Falegra actually... If you boarded them, they would be a much better target for Stealthy Raiders. Raga, you can do Stealthy Raiders. Raga, you could probably do the scout stealthy raiders with the leopard rod or whatever. But down here, yeah, it's probably the heavier commitment. Okay, so anyway, on to real army composition. And to talk about this, we need to talk about research. So let's see what research you have. You have Alt 5. That gave you Mother Rogue, so you got that up. Drain Life, which can be a really nice way of dealing with thugs. In enough quantities, you can also kill the tyrants with it if they're not doing... what do you call it? Phoenix Pyre? If they do Phoenix Pyre, Drain Life's probably not going to be enough. At higher levels, it's going to give you... So it's 6, and I think this is what your original research target was. I can't remember. But Skeletal Legion's pretty good on your ghosts. Don't forget to cast it. It's really cheap, just 1 Death Gem. Or 2 if you're Death 3. Darkness would be pretty good, but the thing... We're going to look at all the research you have, and we're going to look at like what you could get, and which of your neighbors would it be good against. So the thing about Darkness... let's look at all the things we get. Will of Fates, by the way, is always good on this nation. But, yeah, the big things you're going to be getting here really are in Death and Astral. And really it's just, like, if you go up 1 level, it's Skeletal Legion and Darkness. Those are the big things. So how good are they going to be against various nations? It'll be very good against Jaguar. Darkness is very good against Jaguar Warriors. Very, very good. So if, like, we were really worried about Jaguar Warriors, then going up to Alt 6 to get Darkness would be the shit. Not very good against Stasi's, right? Pretty good against slaves, but you're not really worried about slaves to start with. They're just going to run anyway. So, like, Darkness is okay against Mictlan, but not great. Against Ulm, not that great, because against archers, Darkness will lower their precision. But if your guys are all clumped up, it doesn't really matter. And then Skelly Spam, it's not going to help much, so Darkness not great here. But Skeletal Legion... Oh, Skeletal Legion, not very good against Mictlan. Skeletal Legion, pretty good against these guys, because it's going to reduce damage from arrows, which is nice. It'll make it so they don't one-hit kill your ghosts if they get through Ethereal. And it's good for Thralls, because this is piercing damage. And it's going to be okay against Skelly Spam, because some of the skeletons have spears. So, Skeletal Legion, 2 thumbs up for against Ulm. Doing our rounds, probably not going to matter against Tyrants. Against Raga, it could matter a good deal. The Zedaeans. Okay, so Raga has, like, these guys with lances, it will be good. These guys, they have a lance too, but then they have a bunch of slashing stuff, so it's not awesome against them, but it is the highest damage attack, the lance. It's okay. But I don't know. I think it depends. If you're just fighting the Zedaeans, not really worth it to do Skeletal Legion, but, like, they have a lot of... where the hell are they? Yeah, I mean, we can see they have a fair amount of archers, which it would be good against. Yeah, I don't know. It wouldn't be super great against them. So, okay, overall reading on value of Alt 6, definitely valuable, but not super duper valuable. Probably most valuable against Ulm. Darkness it's expensive to cast through. Every time you cast it, it's going to be 4 death gems. You're going to need a mage there. If these guys don't have dark vision, it's going to be really good against them. If they do have dark vision, not so good. But then down here, Darkness is much lower value against Ulm, and pretty low value, but okay against Mictlan. Good value against the Jaguars. So we'll see. The thing is, getting Alt 6 now, yeah, I mean, you could get it in 2 turns. But it's going to delay you starting to fort up the lake. And every turn you delay forting up the lake, you're going to be giving up temples. And you're going to be giving up all the free spawn that your forted lake provinces are going to generate. So, while it would be nice to go up to Alteration 6. I am going to go ahead and say and delay it till after Conjuration 7. And then it's probably worth picking up. Because you really, really, really need... let's talk about the other things you get. So, you also get Ivy Kings. So if you want to have somebody running around with your army casting stuff in nature, you're going to get access to that, which is nice. The death stuff isn't going to matter as much. So yeah, that is kind of, I think, immediate short run options for Alteration. Let's look at what else you have. You have Evocation 7. So this is the highest school you've researched, and I really like it. I think Evocation is really, really good for Lemuria. I don't think you're fully using it yet. So you had some Wind of Death traps set up. Like you had one here that Ohm saw coming, and they dodged it. So they actually put a Wind of Death bait out so that you would still use your gems. Like they had this adventurer here. And apparently this was enough that triggered your guy to say, let's go ahead and use gems. Okay, well, anyway, your guy ran off. He ran, I think, down here. No, he didn't. Where did you run to? Oh, here he is. He ran back inside the fort. So, he's got a Rune Smasher, which is really nice. I like to see you comboing that. And actually, while we're on it, we're going to go back and we're going to talk all through Evocation. But while we're on it, let's talk about good Wind of Death casting. You have the pearls for it. What you can do is just pop on... I didn't really do this on my Lemuria Let's Play. But this is kind of like next level Wind of Death shit, is you do a Ring of Returning. You pop it on this guy. And then you can even... and then you just give him like an air gem too, in addition to the death gem. And you script him something like this. If you're worried about flyers, you probably don't want to do it. You probably want to do just turn 1 casting. But you can do Mist Form, and then you just do Wind of Death until you pass out. And this is pretty solid. The Imp's kind of nice, I guess, to keep some stuff off you. Though I kind of might prefer Eye of the Void, but hard to know. Eye of the Void will open you up to things like Enslaved Mind and Soul Slay. But anyway, yeah, pretty effective to do Wind of Death traps, and it's definitely a reason to go for Evocation 7. If you're running into flyers, like if you're fighting Micklin and you're potentially going to have a lot of flyers and you want to do Wind of Death trap, better to, I think the way to do it is you're just going to do the turn 1 Wind of Death like you were doing, but you have the Ring of Returning. Just make sure you put some decent armor on him. Because hopefully you're going to get it back. The other thing you can do, and you have water mages, is throw a coral sword on them, and make sure they're holding it the turn before, if you can. Right, because the turn you put it on, like, they need to be holding it for a full turn before you issue the orders to do the Wind of Death, if you want them to start off with the base HP. But I think if you do that, you'll be looking pretty good. And you definitely have the pearls to do a few, and you don't need many. You need like 2 Rings of Returning to do your Wind of Death trap properly. And again, if you're fighting an army, do Mist Form plus. If you're fighting an army with like a lot of archers, the archers can trigger Ring of Returning too. So then you can do like the shield. You have lore masters somewhere. I forget where they. Is it here? Yeah. So I don't know. If you get the air earth random, you can make the Shields of Valor, I think, which gives you the air shield. And it's also in and of itself, the shield's going to block a lot of arrows. So yeah, you can feel free to kit these guys up if you put a Ring of Returning on them. Putting some decent armor on them, giving them a Shield of Valor. If you're fighting archers, you probably want to do that instead of the Coral Sword. Rune Smasher is a good call. And then you can have them cast it multiple times, you know? Drop that shit. And then as soon as they get hit or take damage, poof, they go home. And you can take the stuff off of them. So, anyway, super cool to run up to Evocation 7. I dig it. The thing you're not using, and it's actually the major secret weapon of Lemuria, is Stygian Rain. And it's what, in my opinion, makes going up evocation for Lemuria so damn good. Because not only are you getting like this huge offensive threat with Wind of Death and then Shadow Blast in evocation, but you're also getting really good defensive buff. So what this is going to do is it's going to give you 10 invulnerability, but it's going to give it to everybody on the battlefield. It's also going to cast Rain, which can be good. It's certainly not bad, since you're not going to be doing any fire magic. But not many nations can use it, because you can really only use it on nations that have a lot of magic weapons. Like, you have magic weapons on all your troops, so you can use it, because it's going to give the enemy invulnerability 10, but you'll hit through it, because you have magic weapons. So boom. If you didn't have magic weapons, you could cast it and it would end up helping the enemy more than it helps you. So this is super good on Lemuria if you're fighting people without a ton of magic weapons. And guess what? You're fighting people that don't have magic weapons almost at all. You're fighting Micklin without magic weapon in their Bless. You're fighting Ulm, which is relying on Skelly Spam plus archers, with so far no flaming arrows. And I don't know what Raga's going to do. Raga might have magic weapons. Might not be quite as good with them. It'll be really good against Relay too. I think you can drop it underwater. Oh no, you cannot, because it's a rain. So, yeah, this is super good. Adding this to your fights, like to your big battles, is going to be super important. Let's talk about how to cast it, just so we're all there. Your water randoms, which you have a couple in your capital, they can all cast it. Now, how are you going to get them to cast it? You're going to make them forge a water bracelet. You need to be water 2, death 3 to cast, right? Once you've checked that off, you just drop 2 or 3 death gems, depending on what you want their fatigue to be afterwards, and you just have them cast it, and they'll be good to go. Yeah. So, super duper good. Let's look at what else you have. Oh, let's take a look at Astral real quick. Astral, you got Mind Hunt, which is nice. Nether Darts, which is a good off-script spell. Yeah, pretty solid. You have Construction 6, so that opens up a lot of options. We're not going to go through those. But, you know, it opened up things like Water Bracelets, so it's really nice that you have that in combination with Evocation 7. It makes casting Stygian Rains a lot easier, so it doesn't look like that you've been casting it this game, but you certainly did the research which enables it, so that's good. Enchantment, the other really important school of magic for Lemuria. This gives a few things. Anti-magic at level 4, super duper important. Needs to go up almost every fight. Would have helped a lot in your fight against Batala. A lot of the damage was from flaming arrows, but there's also a lot of damage from solar rays and banishment and stuff like that. And like, it looks like Micklin has a ton of banishment coming out. So anti-magic in all of your big armies should be ubiquitous, like every single fight. Once you empower your god in water, which was something you need to do anyway, any turn they're not making a fort, which like for the next few turns they won't be able to do, start cranking out Claim of Pearls, because you're going to want to be doing anti-magic every single battle in your major armies. So you can script them to like turn 1 Power the Spheres, turn 2 anti-magic, and they can do that with just a Claim of Pearls. So go ahead and make a Claim of Pearls for your major army stacks. Death, you get your other important enchantment stuff. You get Rigor Mortis, which is obviously the shit. It got nerfed just by making it more expensive in terms of gems and fatigue. So it's a rather significant nerf. Now you really need your death randoms to cast Rigor Mortis, or you have to put a staff on your death 3s. And if you want them to do anything else, you kind of want to put 4 gems on them. So yeah, rather than 3. So it's a very expensive spell to drop now, but it's still really, really good, and you want it in all your major armies. So Rigor Mortis is the shit. It's appropriately priced now, I think, but really good. So Yeah. You have that. That's really good to have in the bag. The other thing that you have is in water, you have Grip of Winter. And this is really, really good to have access to. Most all your guys have cold resistance built in. You have cold in your Dominion. So just drop this when you can. The problem is you don't really have an easy way to cast it because you need to be water 3. Yeah. If you're water 3, you can put 3 gems in it and cast it. Without communions, it's going to be really hard for you to get up to water 3. And I think your mages are scarce enough and they're hard enough to kind of... You also don't have... To do communions with Lemuria, you really want to do like Earth Astral to make some of the slave matrices, or you need some of the like indies. And I looked through your indies, I didn't see, and I could be wrong. I mean, you have lore masters, but those aren't really great communion slaves. I don't see like a great source of communion slaves for you. So I think that's out. So what we're really left with is like, okay, we know we want to put this up in our fights. How do we do it? Well, we have a big water bank. You have 187 water gems, minus 50, which you're going to use to empower your pretender. The nice thing about running up to Conjuration 7 for Living Castle is it's also going to open up at 6, which is very soon. That's only like two turns away. Sea King's Court, and that is going to give you a Sea King, which is a Water 3 mage. And what's nice about that is you can put a bracelet on them and a Water Lens, which is only like an additional 10 gems worth of items. And then Sea Kings generate 1 water gem a turn, which you can use to kind of fuel back your water economy, but not really. I would just use that to cast this wonderful spell, which only costs 2 water gems if you're water 4, and that's called Grip of Winter. So basically every single turn with a Sea King, you can cast Grip of Winter without any kind of like gem management. So that's the shit, right? You don't need to put water gems on them. You just have them run around. I mean, you could put a few on them and put them on conservative gem use and just have them cast Grip of Winter every fight. And if you're doing that in conjunction with Rigor Mortis, you get like stacking returns. These spells are much better with each other than they are apart. Yeah. So it's going to make it very, very difficult to fight you in a pitched battle if you put both of those up and they don't have cold resistance. Yeah, especially if they're fighting you in Cold Dominion, like in cold temperature scales, and you do Grip of Winter and Rigor Mortis, forget about it. Forget about it. If you bring 1,000 undead, they're just dead. They're dead. It's very, very difficult to fight against. And it's early enough in the game. I don't know if I mentioned it. It's turn 46. But yeah, that's really early. Oh, sorry, I clicked out real quick. But I'm hitting research. I hit my stop recording key. Really early in the game. So, I mean, people are going to have key research. Like, people, people having Frostfiend is not off, it's not something that people might not have. But you're probably going to have a nice little window where it's not researched. And not everybody can cast it. Like, Ulm doesn't have great water access. Late Age Micklin, I do not think has good water access. Excuse me. Let's see, where's Micklin? Oh, no, they do. So they can cast it. Where are we? Falegra can cast it, but they're not going to be able to cast it with these guys. These guys can do... With fire, you can also get it if you run up Alteration. So, I mean, various people can cast, like Raga, if they went Heat Raga, which I can't tell if they did. It looks like they went neutral temperature scales Raga, hard to say. Or Cold Raga. But, okay, I mean, they might have it. It's hard to know. Anyway, it's good to be able to throw out, especially when all of your stuff is cold immune. So, I would say Grip of Winter, you already have it. Better use it. Really good to have. The other thing that we have access to that we currently have no way of really casting is Foul Vapors. Now, you're going to water empower your god. Once you have water empowered your god can do this. But you're going to have your god doing other stuff. So I think this one's off the table. But if there's some massive fight where it's like going to make or break the game, you can go ahead and pull your god in there. Teleport her into a battle, have her cast Foul Vapors. So another reason to... Like, what's a situation you might do that? They're cracking a fort, you have an army pinned inside the fort, you have mages pinned inside the fort, or you're sneaking mages inside the fort, or you've already done that, and you know there's going to be a battle inside the fort. Teleport your god in. Do foul vapors. It can totally change the battle. Now, to do it, like to cast it regularly, which is something you would love to do. If you could do foul vapors every fight, like, you would die. You would love that so much. You need Jade Amazons, right? I was looking through this to try to find them. I don't see any Jade Amazons in any of your provinces. Like, I would fight a war to find Jade Amazons. If you see any, like if you're clicking around on any border province, and I haven't done this, but... And you see, or you attack any PD, and you see, oh my god, there's, like, Jade Amazons in that PD. That is a province that you must have, and you must have it immediately. I don't see any, but that doesn't mean they're not there. If you find a Jade Amazon province, it's the biggest deal. Find a way, like, make sure you keep it, you fort it, you lab it, and you crank out some Jade sorceresses, because you throw a Thistle Mace on them, you throw a Cornucopia. If you're going to be dropping Grip of Winter, you're going to throw some cold resistance on them too. And, like, just to be safe, you can throw a Coral Sword on them. And yeah, just have them drop foul vapors every single fight. And you will be very, very happy. With a Cornucopia and a Thistle Mace, they can drop it every fight. And that's their whole job. And there's just one more thing they have to commit to actually be able to fight you. Is like, now I have to poison resistance this huge army that I have sieging down a Lemurian fort with 200 guys inside of it. The thing you have to understand, like, I think playing a nation well, you have to understand how frustrating it is to fight against a nation when played properly. And the impossible thing about fighting Lemuria is they potentially could have, like, 200 guys inside a fort, which are going to be adding 100 siege defense. The fort's got 500 wall strength. So, like, this army here from Ulm, it's a 200-person army. It probably has about 200 siege strength. So they're going to be doing, after you subtract out 100 siege defense, they're going to be doing 100 siege strength of damage. It's going to take them 5 turns from sitting on top of a fort that has basically 0 supplies, so they're going to be starving unless they brought gear. So it has 0 supplies. They're going to be getting all diseased up. They're not getting any income from it, so they've got their whole army there consuming resources without doing anything. It's just sitting, it's not fighting, it's not killing ghosts, it's doing shit. It's just sitting there slowly sieging down a fort, right? But then if they want to bring more, then who knows? You might drop all that stuff I was just talking about. You've already researched. Like, you could do Wind of Death traps, which you've kind of been doing. You can do Grip of Winter, Foul Vapors, all that stuff. And meanwhile, you have all this time to, like, move in a big army and take the fight at exactly the time you want to. So that's, like, the most frustrating thing about fighting Lemuria. So when I say, like, you can just totally chill out and pick your fights while you make sure you fort up the oceans, that's kind of how I'm thinking about it. Okay, so we've talked a lot about enchantment now. Thaumaturgy, you, I think, just got this for Soul Slay. Maybe there's some other stuff. Growing Fury is not bad for Lemuria. Your ghosts can run. Making them not scared is okay. Death. Plague can be good to get. I've actually never really successfully used it, though I'm told it's quite good for Lemuria. I think that's about it. Gateway can be nice for Lemuria too. You can move a lot. If you build, this is something I didn't do, but something you can do. If you build gear so that you can get your guys up to Astral 4, like Crystal Coin, which you can eventually get from a Lore Master, and a Starshine Skullcap, or you just have an Astral 3, like this guy, and you put a Starshine Skullcap on him. You can also give him all of the Death gear, which gives you increased command, like this, the Crown of Bones. And this, the Rod of the Leper King. There might be another one too. But anyway, you throw that gear on him. You give him Skull Staff too, which will just give him a bit more. You can potentially take like an army of like probably like 250, and you can just zap them inside a fort that's being sieged down, right? And just like that, they can go from making slow progress, like, because if you take 250 dudes, you don't want to use the shadows, remember, use your normal troops, and you just zap them underneath a fort that they were making gradual progress on, and when they've got a big army sitting on top of a fort and they get a message like, oh, the walls are repairing, it just makes you want to cry. I mean, it's really, really frustrating. So, I mean, it costs you a few pearls, but, you know, what is it really? So again, you're seeing how these ghosts are kind of a resource. Like, you really need to... You gotta be careful. Like, when you lost this battle here, like, on one hand, you could be like, oh, you know, whatever, I just lost a bunch of free spawn. And that, I think of these guys as, like, these guys are totally free spawn. But, like, all these other guys, these are, like, these are real resources for you. Right, that can be used to teleport around and hold up fort walls, etc., etc. Okay. So we've talked about what you have. We've talked about like immediate research priorities. We've talked about like next research. So immediate research priorities get up to Conjuration 7. Then Alt 6, which is going to give you Darkness and Skeletal Legion. Depending who you're fighting, Skeletal Legion can be a better spell to cast in Darkness. Like Ulm Skeletal Legion is going to be the shit, right? But this is potentially like 5 turns away, 6 turns away, 6 turns away. Because I think you do definitely want to go Conjuration 7. Both for the Sea Kings, which is going to open up Grip of Winter, and for Living Fortress. The good news is, man, like, okay, you're in like clearly the #1 position in the game, and you already have researched almost all the stuff you need to like wreck people. So the other thing is you've got a lot of forts coming up. You've got a fort coming up here, which is awesome. You got a fort coming up here and a fort coming up here. This is all super sick. Like once you have this, like you're going to be in really good shape. The only kind of risky thing is this army may come kind of interrupt you. You're building palisades here. I don't know if this is going to make it up. It might. It might. Kind of risky. But whatever, you know? Like, if this one goes up and this one doesn't, that might be okay. And this fort isn't cracked yet. So it's possible that this army's going to like hang tight for another turn or two before they come here and knock you off this one. Though, if they're any good, they would come knock you off here and knock you off here, and they could knock both these forts down. But you're still getting this one up. Maybe. Actually, they have time to actually knock all 3 of these down. That would be really frustrating. But you'll get this one up, because it's going to come up next month. So, anyway. You know, what you could do, potentially... I mean, this gets to like the kind of stuff that you can do. Is like, if you had a Ring of Returning, you pop it over here on this lady. This is almost Friendly Dominion. But yeah, Ring of Returning here, throw some whatever shitty armor you have on is fine. Like this. And then teleport her in to do like a serious Wind of Death trap right here. Give her that that Rune Smasher. And yeah, they move a big army over here. They're going to be hurting when they run into a Wind of Death trap. And that's probably worth it just to protect these castles from coming up. Because, you know, your god dies, who cares? You summon them back. I mean, they're immortal. They'll respawn. But even just seeing it there, it might give them second thought about actually going, like, sending people into a Wind of Death trap, right? So... that's an idea to do, and then from here you can have them empower while they just hang tight. And then, yeah, if they get, if she gets hit, like if the Wind of Death trap triggers, or they send something to like inadvertently hit it, and then your guy ends up using the Ring of Returning. Now, I mean, it could be you cast Wind of Death twice, then your pretender goes off script and Skelly spams and kills whatever little raiding party they had. But if it triggers, they just go back home. And then you can send her into the sea after you've done the water empowerment, and she can do Living Castle. So that's probably what I would do like in the short run, because keeping these forts going up is like super important. Um, but anyway, I've kind of gone on a rabbit trail here. Um, but I think how you play this nation is super important. So we've talked about city and forts. Now, when you're going to make this army that's going to smash player armies, you have to understand that Lemurian armies are really bad against most player armies by default. Like, without a ton of mage support, without a ton of buffs, bringing a ton of ghosts to a big fight, which is basically like what I see this as, right? You brought a ton of ghosts to like a mage supported army, and he didn't have his communion set up right, so you killed these mages, but otherwise they wouldn't have died, and that's really the only significant loss he had. I mean, all this other stuff is kind of crap. Like, you don't want to do this. And I mean, he didn't even do hardly any good stuff, and I think the only reason his stuff died was because of Rain of Stones, actually. Like, it's probably how most of the Marcotte, and most of this was like Marcotte and shit. Crossbowman died from Rain of Stones. If he did buffs, like if he did mass protection or something, like none of this, he would have probably had like 5 deaths, right? So if you assume like the people you're playing against are going to do the right things, then yeah, like this is, you would have lost all this and killed like 10 things. Yeah, so you want to avoid doing that. And what that means is you don't actually, like if you, I don't know how many Grand Lemurs you have, but I was kind of looking around, it looks like you might have like 10 or 12, maybe more. Maybe you have like 15. You don't actually, and I don't know if I mentioned this in Evocation. I talked about Winds of Death. You also have Wailing Winds, which is the shit. This is really, really good. All your guys can cast it. Even the Death 3 ones can cast it if you give them three gems, and it's really good. It's really good against Spatala. A lot of their guys have crap morale. It's pretty good against Ulm. They don't have great morale. Okay against Mictlan. I think the Jaguars don't have great morale, but the Aussies have great morale. So as Mictlan transitions to being like more Aussie focused, which most Mictlans do, it becomes less good. But like versus slaves, like, oh man, it's going to cause all these slaves to rout in like one turn. And like once the slaves are out, the Jaguars will rout. So actually having all these slaves, which he's bringing to like siege things down quickly, is a huge liability for him. Because what's going to happen once you put Wailing Winds up, the slaves are going to rout. And then once all the slaves are routing, then Jaguars are going to be like, oh shit, we need to run too, because you can cause an HP rout. So Wailing Winds, super good. I didn't mention it. But like this guy, I can't tell if he actually may have been part of the army. You scripted him to Winds of Death. It's the wrong spell. You want to do Wailing Winds here. So okay, we're talking about how to win big battles, and we're talking about how to think about Lemurian armies. They're either sitting in forts where there's a ton of value having ghosts sit in forts, which you can gateway around to sit in forts too. You're doing kind of low commitment ratings with like some chaff, which you literally, this kind of chaff you give 0 shits about. 0, right? Mixed in with a few things to deal damage and throw javelins and stuff, right? You're going to do lots of that. Or you're going to be in a big army. In the big army, none of this business, right? Where we're dropping like Rain of Stones or I don't know, whatever else you cast. Like you didn't cast much. Yeah, there's no Grand Lemurs, right? Your Grand Lemurs are not to research. They're not even primarily to do Winds of Death. They're to support extremely large Lemurian armies. So when you get ready to roll out, like you have to understand, like this, there's a situation where these guys are pretty good. Like how you have them set up is basically raiders. Like when you're running into, because like this is enough just crap is what it is. It's enough crap to kill even a pretty sizable Lemurian raiding squad. So there's a reason for like bowling this in if you know there's no way you're going to fight a player army. But you have to be very careful about this because you're risking a lot. This is a high commitment raid. What you generally want to do is like, so have 2 armies. This is a goal. This is another goal for 15 turns. Have 2 armies, right? In each of those armies, they need to be ready to cast all the spells I'm about to list every single fight. You want to have anti-magic in each of those armies going up every single fight. Every fight. You're going to have Grip of Winter once you have your Sea King's research, which would be pretty soon. This is still definitely part of a 15-turn goal. Grip of Winter going off every single fight. You can have Rigor Mortis going off. This one, it costs a lot of gems, so you may or may not decide whether you're going to do Rigor Mortis just to like penny pinch on gems. But Rigor Mortis going off almost every other fight. Wailing Winds going off. This is cheap now, especially if you have a Death 4. If you have a Death 3 casting, it's a little more expensive because you got to do 3 gems. You have a Death 4 casting, it's only 2 gems. Death 4 casting it every fight. Death 3, when you think there's potentially going to be a big fight. Yeah, Wailing Winds going off all the freaking time. Stygian Rains. This is like, unless you're fighting somebody with like only magic weapons, or you're fighting underwater. Every single fight, this one should be going off. This is like one of your most important spells, given your current matchups and what their blesses are. This one's so important. So, and I'm making like big requests here. I'm saying like a lot of stuff needs to be going off. And I'm also saying you need a lot of troops in these armies. And you may be thinking like, how am I going to do this? This is a lot of stuff to do. And the answer is, well, you got to put those, you got to get, look, these guys are like, they've got desk jobs, right? But we're paying them big bucks, right? They need to be out there where stuff's happening, kind of doing work. So you've got an air random, a water random, and an astral. Okay. Wind of Death traps are nice. Okay, here's the thing. You can do Wind of Death traps. They're fine. It's a little risky. Right? Like, okay, I mean, here you did it in the right spot because he had an army that he moved off. Like, this army was here, I assume, the turn before, and he moved it off. And so that was, I mean, look, this is a good spot to do a Wind of Death Trap. Problem, though, is, like, you're fighting archers. You're going to hit some of them. Well, let's see. Wait, here they are. How would it have done? They're going to move forward to attack. Would have been okay. You kind of could have gotten 2 Well, let me see what that one is. 9? Okay, I mean, it would have been legit. You would have killed some stuff. Okay, look, this is when you want to do it. I don't want to say you're doing it at the wrong time when you do it at the right time. They're sieging your stuff down? Yeah, that's exactly when you want to do it. The thing, though, is that if they bait you like they did here, you can see they still have a single thrall on top, and it's because your guy retreated. What you want to do is do your Wind of Death traps with Ring of Returning, and you just have them keep casting. You don't have them retreat. Fuck retreating. Have them cast. They'll skelly spam after Wind of Death. Your guys have pretty good MR. It's unlikely you're going to decay yourself. And then if you put decent gear on, especially if you get like a Shield of Valor or whatever, you know, like, there's a very good chance. Like if you do Mist Form and you have, well, no, I think you do just decent armor. You do good armor. Shield of Valor if you can do it, this, Ring of Returning, and you only need like 1 or 2 of these, and then they just know if they park anything on top of your stuff, this guy's going to come in, he's going to cast Wind of Death a few times, then he's going to go off script and skelly spam. You can throw Reinvigoration gear on them for their boots too. You have like, I saw you had Nature Indies somewhere, so you can kind of have them forge a few of them, which are just, I mean, those things are so good anyway. Boots of the Messenger. I would have like a lot of Boots of the Messenger with your nature income. Just as a general point. But it's good to put on these guys too. So, yeah. Good to do this, but don't think you need to be relying on it. I think I put, like when I've played Lemuria, I put too much faith in Wind of Death, and you need to make sure you're doing Wailing Winds in each of your 2 major armies, right? So, but I think, like, you can have one guy running around that's going to Wind of Death people if they sit on your forts, right? Like this guy. And then you have this guy and the one in your capital, and their whole job is to follow around your big armies and drop Wailing Winds, right? So, okay, what do we said? Anti-Magic, Wailing Winds, Stygian Rains, Rigor Mortis, Grip of Winter, those are the main ones, right? And I could be missing something, but I don't think so. The other thing you are going to want to put up, and this is definitely by turn 15, is Skeletal Legion. Depending who you're fighting, but if they have piercing weapons, Skeletal Legion, all right? And then potentially Darkness. I consider this can be like very oppressive, depending who you're fighting. Like versus Raga, if they don't have Dark Vision and they're using Zedaeans, and like any other troop. Darkness is going to help a lot. It's going to significantly slow the rate at which they kill your stuff, and it's going to make you hit them a lot more. So Darkness is definitely good. The thing is, as you start stacking all these up, you have to be a little cautious about how many you spend per fight. So if you have a big stack moving around and there's no chance that a big army's going to attack you, you want to turn things like Darkness off, right? Because somebody's going to come out. You want it to still be scripted strong enough to kill like a medium army that's going to come out and hit you. Because if you're not scripted to cast your stuff and something comes out, like, oh man, you're in some deep shit. You're in really deep shit, right? But like things like Darkness, you want to turn off unless you know there's potentially going to be a really big fight, and it will help you. But those are the basic things. And if you think about how you're going to need at least probably 4 Grand Lemurs to cast all that shit. And then in addition, you're going to need your Sea King. So like pretty heavy investment into each of those armies. Yeah. Now, that's 15 turn goal, have 2 armies like that. Once you have those two armies, you can be picking what you do. You can be taking infrastructure with them, or you can be knocking player armies off, right? Meanwhile, you're fording up the ocean, right? And raiding to get some income, and building up these forts. But I think that's like a very reasonable thing to do within 15 turns, is be doing all that stuff. Now, how do you win the game? Well, okay, there's one more thing we have to talk about. Killing thugs and super combatants. I tell you what, you can skelly spam all day long, but if there's like, especially if they go berserk. Ooh, God, when a super combatant or thug goes berserk against Lemuria, and you have these little shitty ghosts sitting on him, it's really hard to kill him. You have ways to do it. So you have consuls. These are your best counter thugs. How are you going to do it? Well, let's go through some of the options, right? The basic thing that you have that works pretty damn well is Dusk Daggers, right? And they do 2 things that are really good. One is Draw Blood, which is going to give them profuse bleeding, which is the shit for killing thugs and super combatants, and it's armor negating damage. This is one of the best anti-thug, anti-super combatant weapons in the game. Problem is, you put them in your front line, and your front line tends to die. So, handle with caution a little bit. If you're fighting like Micklin, though, if you throw a Vine Shield on a console too with one of these guys, like Micklin doesn't really have. I mean, when you get into Blood, you can always have access to thugs and super combatants. But like, if I'm like Blood, Ice Devils can like really mess with one of these armies I've described that you're buffing up, because you're going to buff it up, but you're not going to have a way to deal with a Berserking Ice Devil potentially, or with a Lace Dragonian Tyrant. But if you have like a console with a Dusk Dagger. And maybe he's flying because he has boots of flying, or I don't know. And he's scripted to, attack large as on the 5th turn. You can deal with thugs that are otherwise going to kind of checkmate your army. Because I can tell you that's like a major source of frustration playing Lemuria, because you don't have any killy troops to deal with them. The other way to deal with thugs, and this way is pretty good, and with enough firepower, you can actually kill tyrants. But the best way I have found to do it is you take the Centurions, these guys, and you give them Standards of the Damned, which are expensive. It's like 25 death gems. So you give them Standards of the Damned, and you just have them scripted to cast spells. And they will run forward and spam Drain Life. The problem is, any Death Mages, even though you have Drain Life researched, your Death Mages don't really like casting it. They rather make skeletons. Now, you need enough of this to get through MR, so I'd kind of like pair these together. But now this is a sizable investment, so you have to think, what are you using these for? Well, you're using it to keep your army from dying to thugs and super combatants. So how would I do it? Well, I'd probably have 3 consoles. I'd start off with 2 consoles with this, and just have them scripted to cast spells. And they will cast this thing until they go blue in the face. Now, this is now a sizable investment, and you don't want to lose this. Now, because these consoles should not be in direct hand-to-hand, you can throw a Ring of Returning on them. So Rings of Returning are going to be your friend. It's good for Wind of Death traps, and it's also good for your Standard of the Damned carriers. So you throw some Rings of Returning on your Standard of the Damned carriers. You have them marching around with your army, and their whole job is to kill super combatants who could otherwise checkmate your army. Like, and it's important because even things like vampires, when properly well, not really, because undead stuff that's fighting your army, they can be hit with Dust to Dust and Wither Bones. And it's an argument for putting your guys, after they're done, you can script. I would script them with stuff to, like, I don't know, sit at the back, whatever they're going to do. You know, you can do like this, but then advance and cast spells at the end. And that way, if there's thuggy stuff, then they'll tend to walk up and kill it. Okay. So we're working our way through. We're dealing with thugs and super combatants. Not now is like a standalone threat like these tyrants, though this will deal with potentially tyrants. Let's see how much he regens for. Because he's got regen as part of his bless. It's going to be 10% regen. He's going to regen for 15. So theoretically, one guy spamming Drain Life every turn will kill him. Because it's armor negating damage, it's going to be like 15 damage every turn. So even having one in an army is a good thing. I would start off with having one in an army, try to work your way up to 2 in an army, and then maybe 3. But at some point, the trade-off is it takes a lot of death gems, right? And the more death gems you put into that, the fewer armies you can have, because the number of armies you can have is going to be limited by the number of Grand Lemurs you can have to support it. Because you don't want to have 500 or 1,000 troops running around without like 4 or 5 Grand Lemurs supporting them. Now, one thing I haven't said is how many troops do you want to put in one of these armies with like 4 consoles where you're dropping all these spells? The spells are making your troops more effective. But if you don't have many troops there, all those spells are kind of worthless. I would say bare minimum for an army with all that stuff I'm talking about is like 500. And that's a bare minimum. I think properly, you want to be doing like 1,000. Right? And the thing you have to think about is when you mobilize one of these armies, like with 1,000 people, you're having to pull that from all your forts. So all your forts are going to get like much more vulnerable when you do it. So maybe for the first ones, you start off with 500, but you'll probably want to have like, and 1,000's a little high, maybe like 700, right? I think 700 when you're dropping all that stuff is really good. 500's a little low. Because the thing is, a lot of these things become incrementally better as the battle drags on. Like, Rigor Mortis is better the longer the battle drags on. Grip of Winter is better the longer the battle drags on. Stygian Reigns, there's a lot of synergy between all these spells, too. Like, Stygian Reigns is going to make the battle last longer, which is going to make all your fatigue plays work better. So, like, Stygian Reigns by itself isn't awesome. I mean, it's really good. It's going to, like, dramatically increase the effectiveness of your troops versus mundane attacks. But it's not that great by itself. Likewise, Rigor Mortis just by itself isn't that great, especially if you're only doing 300 troops. But, like, let's say you're doing 300 troops and you do Rigor Mortis. They kill 200 of them, your other troops run, game over. Let's say you do Rigor Mortis plus Stygian Reigns with 300 troops, right? Now by the time people start fatiguing out, they've only killed 50 of your troops, right? And meanwhile, you still have 250 stuff to beat the shit out of them while they're all fatigued out. So it's doing a lot of things at the same time that makes your army really effective. Likewise, let's say you did this thing, but you only brought 100 troops, right? But you now brought all the mage support to do Stygian Reigns, Rigor Mortis, whatever. Right? They still are going to kill 50 of your troops, right? But you only brought 100. So they kill 50, now you've got 50 guys left that are fighting a borderline fatigued out army, right? So they're going to kill another 25, your guys are going to run, you're going to lose the fight. And now I know you're not going to bring 100, but this is just showing how it works. Like, you have to count on losing some of your troops every fight, and for you as Lemuria, the battles are going to be much more effective the longer the battle goes. So you have to stall and like let the battle go a long time. And if you're fighting a hard army, that means like bringing enough people for the first wave of guys to kind of die. So anyway, now Flaming Arrows, if that comes out, it's going to go through in part Stygian Reigns, but in part it's not. Like the flaming part will go through, but the normal arrows won't. So yeah, 15 turn goal, 2 armies of 700 with all those spells being cast. Also with 1 to 3, depending on how many you can afford, consoles with Standards of the Dam, and then as you can afford it, Rings of Returning on those consoles so that you don't waste that Standard of the Damned. You don't really, like, if you, okay, I mean, you do care. If your army dies and the Grand Lemurs die, which will happen, they're just going to respawn, right? But with the consoles and the Standard of the Damned, the item's gone and potentially will go to the enemy, right? You don't want that happening. So that's why you don't want Rings of Returning for your mages, but you do potentially want it for your guys. The other reason why you want to be doing anti-magic every fight, even if you're maybe not expecting something, is things like Soulslay will permanently kill your immortals. So it's worth putting it up just in like the off chance that that kind of stuff comes out. Okay, so I think we've talked about light rating, we've talked about medium rating, we've talked about major army composition. All that is going to be effective against Mictlan. All that is going to be effective against Ulm. Now, against Mictlan, spreading your guys out is going to make a big difference. Like if he's got flyers versus... Yeah. Anyway. As long as you have the numbers advantage against Mictlan, I think you're going to be kind of okay. The fatigue play should work fine. Like, all his stuff is on, like, you know... what did he have again? He had quickness. Quickness is good against fatigue plays, but... And, like, these guys, they only have one hit. So actually... Like, fatigue plays are really good against Jaguars because they don't have, like, they have a fair amount of encumbrance in the cold, right? So, which is what they're going to be doing if they're attacking you. So, once they get in combat, they're going to start fatiguing. They don't have magic weapons. They have a single attack. These Aussies are going to do a little bit more, but still no magic weapons. But with quickness, you know, it's like 2 attacks. Yeah. I think you're set. And like, what was there? Oh, they had some Jaguars here, didn't they? Yeah, what is their morale? Oh, I clicked on an Aussie. 12 morale? Yeah, they'll run from Wailing Winds. So, yeah, you're totally set here. Okay, so we've talked about most of the stuff that you're going to need to, like, win these wars. We've talked about when to use your armies, how to set them up, all that stuff. Tyrants is kind of the thing that I haven't really talked about. We've talked about using dust daggers. So, like, paralyzing's not... If you have enough, like... What's probably the most budget way to kill one of these guys? I would say if you have somebody spam, like Skelly spamming... and then you have a console with a Dusk Dagger. If they're not doing... okay. The problem, though, is these guys are killy. I hate sending stuff in, especially once you're putting items on them, on an Immortal, to... Like, he's just going to murder the shit out of them. I mean, he kills things so fast. And he's got magic attacks. Oof. I mean, so that's one way to do it. You could Skelly spam and you do Dust Daggers and send them in. It's okay. It's okay. The real way to kill him, again, is going to be Standard of the Damn spam. But now it's going to be tricky because now you're going to need, like... Okay, only one guy doing it with one guy Skelly spamming. So think of it like a Grand Lemur, which is 50 death gems, plus a Standard of the Damned and a console, which is like another 30. That will be enough to kill one of these guys, probably. Right, but that's 80 death gems to kill one of these. Now, you have a fair amount of income, right? So you can field that, right? Like, you can get, you know, like, you can do 80 every 2.5 turns. So that's definitely something. And if you have a trap with one of those going around, eventually you'll catch them. So that might not be a bad idea for the short run. Get a Standard of the Damned. Probably, again, Ring of Returning if you can afford it. Your astral income, pretty damn good. So you can make 1 Ring of Returning a turn. And then you have an Immortal running around and you Skelly spam, right? And your PD's going to be Skelly spamming too. So, yeah, you do that. And you spam Standard of the Damned, you're going to kill him. And you set up a trap like that, and then boom. So that's probably the easiest way to deal with it. I would avoid sending people into Thug, but you can do it where people can Thug and kill him. I mean, the problem, though, is once he has Phoenix Pyre, which, let's see if that's castable underwater. It may not be. Cannot be cast underwater, so as long as you're underwater, you don't have to worry about it. So this whole lake you can protect with what I just described. So an 80 death gem investment. And if you think about it, you just have to make a standard. The first standard of the dam I make, because you're gonna have to kind of move troops around and all this stuff to get your armies ready. The first standard of the dam I make, I send any any Grand Lemur, and a consul, or it could be anybody. The consuls I just like because they have armor, so they can take a hit, right? And they have a fair amount of HP and they're cheap. So you send them and a consul with a ringer returning underwater, and you just play whack-a-mole, and you try to guess, and like it's not that hard to predict where he's going to move if he's a good player, because he's going to want to hit temples, right? So you kind of move and you try to catch him, but when you're also kind of trying to protect your temples, and they should murder him. If you want to be a little extra sophisticated, you find your nature mages, you throw Boots of the Messenger on both your guys so they can move farther. I think that should give you map move 2 underwater. And yeah, honestly, if you have, that's probably what I do. Just like whatever kind of fatigue gear you can afford. I know you have an Earth Mage around for one of your, like make some fatigue gear like this, put it on the Grand Lemur so that he gets like reinvigoration 6 or 7. That way he lays out a nice good stream of skeletons. And your other guy's just going to spam out. I think you have to figure out whether you do spells. I would do it in a test game. Figure out what works better, spells or advanced and cast spells for your your Centurion with the Standard of the Damned. But yeah, that little team with Boots of the Messenger, map move 2 underwater, whew, you'll make taking this difficult, and he'll lose some. So I think that's the easiest way. Yeah, that's probably what I would do. I mean, you could trade gem. That's what I would do. You could trade gem efficiently with this guy. Like, there's a lot of gems invested in this, right? And he's expensive. Just by doing like 3 or 4 Centurions with Dusk Daggers. What are their stats? I know you had some around somewhere. Well, let's just pretend they were like this. What kind of brand does he have? Firebrand? Yeah, throw some fire protection on him or something. I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, it's... I forget if they get... Where? I know you had some somewhere. Here they are. Okay, they don't have a shield. Yeah, I don't even know. The thing is, they're gonna die. I mean, a console... Well, I don't know. Let me just say, it could work. Like, maybe it's what you do with your consoles, too. If you want to. The thing is, you're wasting death gems. I hate wasting death gems. I really don't know, dude. I'd probably just do what I said. You want to keep thugs out of melee with this guy, I think. It can work and you can trade gem efficiently, but it's going to cost you a lot, and because you're at war with a bunch of other people, you really want to avoid losing gems. So that's kind of my advice in this case. If it were just like an all-out brawl between you and Felegra, and you didn't really have to worry about everybody else, I would be much cooler with the idea of like, hey, we don't have, like, I can't afford to play whack-a-mole over here with Felegra. I just need to put a few things in every province and kill him, and I'd be like, oh, okay, yeah, let's just spam out, like, we can have each of these guys make Centurions, and we can give them each Dusk Daggers, and, like, 5 Centurions, each with the Dusk Dagger, is going to murder the shit out of a Tyrant, most likely. They'll kill him in, like, 1 hit, right? So he might kill one of them, but the 4 of them will kill him. Especially if you give them any kind of, like, PD cover. Like, if there's 10 PD and they're on, like, attack rear, they run around behind the PD and hit him from the back, yeah, they'll probably hit the shit out of it, like, murder him. So, I mean, it is something you could do, and you would trade efficiently with him, but not without losing stuff. And we don't want to lose stuff. Okay, so I think we've talked about how to basically fight everybody and win. The thing we haven't really talked about is kind of late game. Like, how do you actually, like, not win the battle, but win the war? Like, the overall war and win the game. Well, once you have armies kitted out, as I said, you should be taking stuff. But eventually, those armies, like, potentially could kind of, like, they can lose. And, oh, the other thing, I forgot, you have high earth. You can get Troll Kings at this. So you're going to want Troll King's Court, too. So take your Earth Mages when you go up Conjuration. Get you some Troll Kings, all right? They're going to have a very important role later casting... Oops. Army of Lead and Gold, right? This is really important for Lemuria, especially once things like Firestorm come out. You're also going to want Flame Spirits, which I think you can cast very soon. They're Conjuration 6, so you'll be able to get them very soon. You have some Fire Gems, so that's what I would use. Conjuration right now is going to be a great way for you to get rid of a lot of these gems you've built up. But yeah, Flame Spirit right here. This guy is going to be, I think, actually I don't know. Depending how it goes in your wars will decide, I think, where you push, because I think mostly you want to defend, and then as soon as you wipe out a major army, you can push forward, like, into a major fight. Meanwhile, you can potentially, if you have an extra Grand Lemur lying around, you can be doing deep raiding with your stealthy troops and trying to hit at some of their blood economy. But as soon as you kill a major army, you can then kind of go on the offensive. And depending who you're kind of killing, that will determine kind of like whether you're able to pick off a fort here or there or whatever. But if it's difficult killing Ulm, the thing that is best at killing vampires is Firestorm. And now Firestorm is one of the things I said counters you, and you may be saying, oh shit, how am I going to do Firestorm if it counters me? Well, you already have it researched, right? So one thing is you can do Firestorm traps, where you take you put a guy behind you have to give him a fire hat, so you have to get a flame spirit, you have to give them the fire booster, like the Staff of Elemental Mastery, they have to make a fire hat, then you can have them sit in a province behind PD. If you're going to put the fire hat on a fire spirit, it's a lot of fire gems now, so you probably want to also give them a Ring of Returning. And while the PD gets shot to shit with arrows, you can have the Firestorm kill all their shit. So that's one way to do it. Once you get Alt 9, which is probably a target after... I think you probably want to go Conjuration 8, so you can go ahead and aim for Well of Misery, and then you can go up to Alt 9. After that, you probably want Conjuration 9 for Tartarians, because you have Recuperation in your Bliss. So that would probably be my research priority, though there's potentially things you would change it for. But once you have Alt 9, and so this is now this is not 15 turns, this is way out. Yeah, Flamestorm on Lemuria, when you have Army of Gold up, it's going to make it very hard for Ulm to fight you. I mean, they can do things like Army of Gold too, but you can't. It's very hard to Army of Gold up vampires, and Ulm tends to kind of rely on vampires, and vampires get... I'll just show you. Fire weakness 5, right? So pretty hard to get the... I mean, you basically have to put gear on them, right? Because even if you Army of Gold them, they're going to be 20 protection, but they're going to be no fire resistance. So Firestorm can still kind of get to that. Actually, I remember using vampires and doing Army of Gold and still having them die. So this is a little bit like empirical knowledge rather than theoretical. But it could be I'm misremembering something. But anyway, Firestorm can definitely be good against Ulm. Kind of the point. It can also be good against Falegra. It can also be good against Raga. I think. Not totally sure. But that's... I think, that's like a kind of late target. The other thing is, as you run up Alteration at Alt 7, you're going to get Fog Warriors, which again, since most people you're fighting don't seem to have magic weapons, it's going to be super clutch. Question you may have is, how am I going to cast it? I think this gets us into one of the late game prep things for you, is you need to... Here's a Lore Master. you need this Earth Astral Cross Path so bad, right? Because a lot of the things you're going to need late game, and even in the mid game, like sooner, are going to need it. So keep making these guys until you get that Earth Astral, right? And when you get it, don't ever send them out to fight, right? Earth Astral, you protect. They need to make your crystal matrices. And basically, once you have a crystal matrix, you can start using these guys as communion slaves. You give them a crystal slave matrix or whatever, and you give the other guy a crystal matrix. They're then a slave. They're going to be really good because you have undead, whatever you call it, in your bless, undead regeneration, reforming flesh. So they'll regenerate, so they're kind of little turbo communion guys. If you want to, you can throw additional HP on them too. Like, give them a little coral sword, and they're gonna not only have more HP at the start, but they'll regen more. You can throw soul vortex on them and surround them with bodyguards, and they'll chew up the bodyguards over time, but they will allow you to kind of cast a lot of stuff. So if you have 4 of them, and you have like one of your Grand Lemurs, I think air is going to be the one that you're going to want to really have in a communion. Air is kind of one of the things that there's a lot of good stuff in it for you that is going to be a little hard for you to cast. So like this guy, if he's a communion leader with like 4 of those other guys, you'll have him cast Power of the Spheres, or you can throw a crystal shield on him too. That way he'll start off with it. He's also going to have a crystal master matrix, though he could also do communion master if you don't want to do it, but probably better to not waste a turn. Okay, so once he just enters the communion, he'll be up to air 3. Air 3 is now enough to do mass flight. Right? Air 3 can do mass flight. So you really only need 2 communion slaves to do mass flight. Though if you go up to 4, you can do mass flight and fog warriors once you have it researched. You don't have mass flight researched yet, so once you have Earth Astral going up to enchantment 7, it's going to make a big deal. Let's talk about mass flight a little. Mass flight is good if you think you're going to have a numbers advantage and if they're bringing large amounts of large amounts of mages and priests. If you don't have a strong numbers advantage, and they have a lot of elite troops, and not a lot of mages and priests, you want to, because what does mass flight do? It is going to increase the surface area for combat to take place. If you have the numbers advantage, that will be to your benefit in some ways. Though it's why it wasn't one of my like very high research priorities, because you also want the battle to drag out and go really long, right? Versus vampires, it's going to be the shit because you'll just jump on them and they'll all blow up. Right, so versus Olmet's really good. Versus the archers and the vampires, you'll jump on them, they'll all blow up. Invulnerability is not going to help against ghosts. Yeah. So versus Olmet's really good. So anyway, it's something you can go for, but you need that Earth Astral Cross Path to get there. I wonder if you have any marks that can do it. This guy can actually sometimes. Try to see if you can get this guy. I forget what the white wizard is. I think it's a silver wizard or something. I can't remember. But it's possible he does. You can look it up. I don't know. But anyway, this is kind of like a later game target, which this isn't 15 turns from now, but it's something else you can do that's going to be important. This and Fog Warriors. So for that, you're going to need crystal matrices and stuff. But yeah, Troll Kings are going to be doing your Army of Gold thing, Army of Lead thing. In the meantime, while you're running up, which is not going to be super soon, because you can see it's pretty far down the list, but once you hit, Alt 7, you can have somebody spam out Marble Warriors, which is really good on Undead. Like, arguably is good or better than Army of Gold. So, something to think about. But yeah, I'd take those Earth Gems, convert them into Troll Kings. The troll, like his bodyguards, the people that get summoned with him, they're going to cost you a lot of upkeep. I would figure out how to get them killed off pretty quick. Like, I wouldn't sacrifice them, but I would put them at the front of an army where they can fight as hard as they can, and then they'll, go on and not keep charging you upkeep. So, anyway, that's that. And, think that's mostly it. The other thing, and it's a tool that you're going to have actually in your arsenal already, is Murdering Gwynter. Then you don't have it. You don't have the paths to cast it yet. But once you get the Troll King, the Sea King, you are going to have. You can make a Robe of the Sea and a bracelet. Now, the ones running around with your army, you don't necessarily need to give them a Robe of the Sea. You can give them something else. But if you put a Robe of the Sea on them in a bracelet, they can cast this now for 40 water gems. Now, when you cast it, you're basically... This is expensive. You have to think of this like murdering off a Sea King, because you could go ahead and summon another one. But if you don't have an easy way to kill an army and they're sitting on top of a fort in your own dominion and it's cold, you can't cast it underwater. But if they're sitting on top of this and it's a bunch of human stuff, oh man, God help them. Murdering Winter is really good in Cold 3. So it's something, again, I didn't really use in my Lemuria playthrough, but anyway, it's something that you will have the benefit of. And I think I'm about done. I think I've spent a tremendous amount of time talking through all of this, and if you've listened to all of it, then I commend you. But yeah, I feel like this is in some ways like better feedback than I probably gave in my after action review from Lemuria, because I keep learning as I play more. Yeah, I think you got this one bagged, dude. I think you got it bagged. I think you just have to play your cards right. And it's obviously going to matter, like, which fights you choose to pick, but don't take fights without... Like, big fights, you need a lot of mage backup, man. A lot of mage backup. And tons of raiding pressure. But low commitment raids. One final thing. There's a lot of undead nations you're fighting... Not undead, blood nations. Like, you've got Ulm and Raga, and then Mictlan. Infernal Disease wrecks all your low commitment rating. Like, once you start getting Infernal Disease spam, it will assassinate all of your tribunes, which they're kind of, it's again like everything with Lemuria. It's kind of low commitment, it's replaceable, but if you lose enough of it, it's a big deal. And then you start having to, like, spend death gems to get people to lead your armies. So, once you start getting, like, very intense... You can put people on Guard Commander, too. But it's probably not going to help that much. Once Infernal Disease comes out, they can basically just, for, like, however many Death Slaves, it's not very many, like 5 or whatever. What is it? Infernal Disease... Here you are. 5, yeah. Yeah, for 5 Blood Slaves, I can delete one of these guys, and then leave all of your undead that were in that squad stranded. That's a big deal. Because then not only do you lose that guy, but then they can just move an army in, and your guys are just going to be set to attack, and they'll be guaranteed to wipe it out. So they can bring, like, let's say we have all these guys right here, right? And let's say we were going to give them a move like, hey, everybody run up here. They can do 3 Infernal Diseases here. Now, this guy is tough. He'll be able to kill probably, but maybe not, the Disease Demon. But let's say he was a Tribune. They could kill all these guys. And then they just take the perfect amount of vampires and fly them in to kill just this number of guys without taking a loss. Right? And because our guys are just going to be in a big blob set to attack because they've killed all our commanders. And he could like cast Infernal Disease 5 times. That'd be 25 Blood Slaves, right? And it would leave this entire army stranded, so it's going to prevent his need to, like, anticipate our move. And he just gets to move the right amount of stuff in to kill it. Right? Or he could just move in, a bunch of other mages or some communion or whatever he wants to. Like, or you just take this army and run up here, right? And, he knows we would never leave our army here, but, if we get all our commanders assassinated, we don't get a chance about it, right? So then this army moves in and kills it. So, you end up having to play differently when Infernal Disease comes out. I'll just throw that out there. I don't think there's any right answers for how to play, but Shadowed Tribunes are going to become a resource, which very quickly goes into kind of poor supply, if you will. Or low supply once that comes out. And you may choose to do much less raiding on fronts where you're getting Infernal Diseased. Anyway, I think that is it, guys. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've learned something. And for what, I hope that you win this game. I think you've got a very good shot at it. And I feel really bad for everybody you're playing against. Cheers. Oh, final thing. I didn't mention, but this is a service for top tier Patreon people, and basically it's like $30 a pop. So you can just sign up for a month, and then I'll do it for you. And then yeah, you can get it done again. There's like an update for the next month, or you can just kind of not do it for the next month, and then it's a one-time thing. That's totally cool. So anyway, see you guys. Cheers.